Hello, my name's Tracey-Ann Palmer and I'm an academic from the University of Technology, Sydney in Australia. And I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to tell the Voices 2021 community about my project, ScienceSing. The aim of my project is to create song-based educational resources that engage tweens with science, so students who are in upper elementary, lower secondary. The idea actually came about because when I'm not a science education academic, I sing, and I have a couple of albums that I've produced with my husband. And normally what I'd be doing for my research is looking into why students do and don't choose science for their final years of school, but I couldn't get into schools because of COVID, and I had to come up with another idea. And my idea was to use songs to help engage students in science. So I came about thinking to make these song-based educational resources. I wanted them to link specifically to our Australian curriculum, and we have a curriculum that goes over the whole country here. It had to be evaluated by teachers, fun and free. I didn't want any copyright issues at all, so that everyone could have access to them. I was also very lucky in that I got some funding from my university to do the project. The reason I wanted to work with this, and of course you'll be all over this, is that elementary teachers are absolutely pivotal in developing children's engagement with and interest in science. And certainly here in Australia, students aren't as engaged in science as we would like them to be. We also know from research that primary teachers, elementary teachers aren't very comfortable teaching science. And yet music is so engaging. So that's why I went on this path. I came up with a set of research questions, and I have full ethics approval for the project that I'm doing. And these questions were around what the pedagogical basis was for using songs in the classroom, how they've been used for engagement. I'm particularly interested in engagement, building interest and engagement in science. What's currently available out there, what teachers thought of the idea. I also want to find out how they would choose to use them in the classroom and how students would respond to these songs once they're out there. The reason I decided to focus on tweens actually links with the research that I normally do. My area of expertise is adolescent decision making. So I teach educational psychology as one of my subjects. So it all fitted in really nicely to look at what's happening in teenagers, and I was particularly interested in what happens in just those few years before they become teenagers, before they launch into adolescence. And the thing that interests me the most is that around this age of 12, just before teens, it's when that structure of the brain is going through that dramatic change, and there's pruning of the neurons. Behaviours start becoming more permanent. They're really emotional creatures, and parts of their brain start to die, the bits that they're not using. I don't want that to be science. I also know that this is a time where lifelong interests can be created, and I want to make sure that science is one of those lifelong interests, as it has been for me. Of course, there's fantastic research in this, and I'm sure some of the people that I've read the research about using songs in classroom will be at this conference. But one of the first ones that I went was actually the research by Greg Crowther, talking about how fantastic music was for recall, for stress reduction, different ways of teaching, multimodality in teaching, increasing enjoyment in the classroom, certainly does that for me, and in-depth exploration of content. And it was interesting because there was a lot of stress on helping students learn content. And although I'm interested in that, it's engagement that really gets me wanting to spend my life on helping students become lovers of science. The study that I found that probably is most similar to what I'm trying to do was Donna Governor's PhD study, looking at middle school, and she, like what I have ended up doing, having particular songs available that the teachers could use, although they didn't have to. And she used 6 middle school classrooms, and the teachers used them. Most of them used the custom-made songs that were made by Professor Bloggs. And I was really taken by this research. I found it very interesting. I found the teachers' responses, the fact that they didn't expect it to be as wonderful as it was. But I really liked what the students had to say, so that it's more fun learning about it, science concepts using music, that it sticks in your brain. I particularly like this last quote. Sadly, when the teacher's talking, it's so boring, it goes in one ear and out the other. When I listen to music, I don't really picture anything. I just sit there and listen. It goes in my ear and stops. And that really captivated me. So one of the first stages, obviously I've done a literature review, is to see what's currently available. And I was looking particularly in that elementary, early, middle years type area, although I did have a look at some of the fantastic songs that are available for secondary science. I particularly like Johnny Bellina's stuff, fantastic songs that he's done, particularly around physics. So the songs that I found, just doing searches as if I were a teacher, put myself in a teacher's point of view, they weren't linked to our curriculum, and they were quite limited in use, I felt, and there were very few for upper elementary, quite a lot for lower. The ones that were there seemed to be what I would term quite childish, and certainly the teachers I'd spoken to said that's why they didn't use them, because by the time they get into the upper part of primary school, they're quite grown up and they don't like to be treated as children. Some of them are actually inaccurate. The Earth spinning the wrong way around the sun, for example, and many of them, because they were focused on content, were actually quite complex and would be difficult to use in some stages of the learning cycle. So here's sort of what I've done so far. The literature review, I'm almost at the tail end of that. I've actually done some looking into the use of poetry and related factors, because as I'm sure you all know, there actually isn't a lot of formal research in this area. I did my searches for songs, what I've just told you about. And I've also done this scoping survey to try and find out what teachers already used in class and whether they thought the ScienceSing project was worth my time, I suppose, and theirs as well, because I'm going to ask them to be looking at this with their class. I promoted it through social media. I also got support from a group called Primary Connections, who are a government-funded group that produce rather wonderful resources for use in elementary classrooms in Australia. From all that, I got 24 people completing my survey, which taught me I hadn't done a social media promotion before, not a huge response rate. However, it did give me some ideas. So keeping that in mind, I found out that in primary, remember that's what we call it down here, about half of them had used songs in the lower primary, being the first half of elementary, and only about a third had used it in upper primary. However, when I asked them whether they thought songs in science would be useful, they almost all agreed that they would actually find them useful. I asked them whether, if they hadn't used songs, why, and 10 teachers replied to that for me. And 6 of them said they just hadn't thought of it. And the rest said that they didn't think there were any songs available, and even if they were, they didn't know how to use them. So this was all good news for me, good news for my research. I asked them whether certain attributes of a project like this would be useful to them. So these are things I asked them: whether they were freely available. Yes, that was useful. Freely editable didn't seem to be an issue for them. They wanted to use them as they came, which I thought was interesting. I thought they'd want to play around with them. Linked to the AC, the Australian curriculum, was important to them, but not linked to PC, which is Primary Connections, that the set of resources that the government has produced here. So they didn't need it to fit into what many of them were already using. The one that I probably should have seen coming but didn't was that they wanted a video. that the children were very visual. So that set me on another path of producing videos. And at the end of this presentation, I will play you one of the songs with the video that I created for it. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. The last step I thought would be really important was that they wanted validated by research. And whereas many of them said that, that wasn't as big an issue as I thought it was going to be. So then I turned to the songs. So what sort of songs did I think tweens would find engaging? I mean, how is that going to be different from what adolescents were going to like, or what little kids were going to like in early elementary school? And I found some nice research on that, and particularly this one by Tyler Bickford, talking about the way over time the sort of music that kids like to listen to has actually gone from being folky to being pop. So that made me realise that if I was going to do this, my songs would have to sound contemporary if I wanted to capture this particular market, this particular group of students. And forgive me if I go into marketing. I used to work in marketing as well. So that comes across everything that I do as well, is that idea of informing and changing behaviour. So turning then to the songs, I decided to create 8 songs that go across the Australian curriculum, aimed at those teens, the early adolescents, with key terms and concepts for the curriculum, but actually not focused on teaching content, on engagement. And here we have a learning sequence. It's very popular, which is called the 5 E's, which I recommend you look up if you're not familiar with it, with BIB. And the very first stage of that is engagement. It's all about generating questions, all about building interest, just getting students interested. And one of the keys of that stage is not telling them content. It's not closing it down, it's opening it up. So I was thinking these songs would be really good for that. I created the songs, I wrote them, I used the curriculum as a basis. The terms are all sound, everything that's in there is true and real, appealing to tweens, and I had them produced in a proper music studio, Vienna People Studios. You can see a picture of the most fantastic studio. It's so much fun going into a studio. So if you've been making videos, songs, science songs at home, if you can find the money, go into a studio. It's so much fun. You probably know the song production process, but I thought just in case you didn't, I'd go through it very briefly, because when I was putting together this project, I found that many people that I was dealing with, particularly in academia, had no idea the process that you go through to create a proper produced song. So right from the concept, the research, writing the lyrics and music, creating a demo. I just used GarageBand on my computer to do that. Then it went to my producer, Michael McGlynn, and he did a production on that, and then I put down a vocal. The vocal was comped together, so it's the very best of me all put together. And then it was produced again, and backing vocals were added. Then they mix it so that they make sure everything fits together carefully, and then it's mastered, which is where it's the sound is manipulated so that it sounds good whether you're playing it out of your computer speaker or whether it's on some fancy Bose speaker that you've bought. Then TuneCore is where the songs were published. So my songs are all available on Spotify and Apple Music and all of those sort of platforms. And then finally there was the release, the formal release of the music. It was quite long. I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun. There's a picture of me in the studio recording the music. And this is on the day that I actually launched the CD, which was on the 12th of February this year. The songs I've created, as I said, go across the curriculum. So they're listed there. And you can see that I've tried to do a couple from each area. And it was interesting at the end to map it out. There's still there's still plenty of opportunity for me to write volume 2. I was also very keen that there was a bit of sustainability in these songs, talking about sustainability issues. It's another interesting area for me, and I've actually we have a zoo here in Sydney called Taronga Zoo, which is quite famous, and I worked there for a while setting up a conservation masters for them. So this is another area. It's really been lovely to have a project that brings all of these wonderful things together. When I do get to the end and I play the song, the one I'm going to play for you is the first one I did, which is Blue Dot. And this is my opportunity to tell you a little bit about the videos. I decided that I wanted to make the videos using absolutely freely available video clips, Creative Commons. Everything I've done is under Creative Commons. And the idea was that if I did that in iMovie, although I could have used one of the other freely available movie production platforms, is that it could be something that a teacher could actually do in class, get their students to make videos. I've done 6 of them. I've got 2 more left to do. Hopefully, they'll be ready by the time, and they're all loaded up on YouTube as well. But I'm going to play one for you at the end. So what's happening now? I'm finishing up the literature review. I'm at that stage where I'm trying to synthesize it together and make a story. It's all interesting, but I think there's some really interesting bits going in there. As I say, some things to do with poetry. Of course, music is songs are poetry to music. So it seemed like an interesting connection. So there's something coming up there. I'm currently ScienceSing. The songs are being piloted in 2 schools. I have 2 specialist science teachers who are doing it for me. The way it works here in Australia is that it's often the classroom teacher who teaches science, but some schools have been employing a person who is dedicated to just doing science, and then they will have students come in from different classes. So I've found 2 of those, and they are testing their songs at the moment. It's been a bit tricky because we've just been in lockdown again, so they've been online. So it stalled a little bit, but I'm hoping that we'll get back into that either the final term of this year. We finish up at Christmas time, or maybe next year I'll get some data out of that. I've done all the surveys and the protocols, so once I do this pilot, I'm hoping that the next step will be getting other teachers to use the songs with their class, and really importantly, show me how they think the songs should be used and give me their idea. And I've been putting together resources based around what's happening, what they choose to do. And I'm already getting ideas from the pilot school. It's great. So an overview then is ScienceSing, teacher-tested, pedagogically sound resources for engagement, linked to our curriculum, but really it's the same, more or less, that all of you will have in your particular country, and focused on tweens. But once again, it's all about engagement. I have a website called Fresh Minds for Science. It has all of my research on it. So if you're also interested in encouraging students to choose science in their final years of school, then my information on that is there as well. And I've already started putting resources into this area for teachers to use. There's the lyrics there. The other thing I have to do is to do chord charts for the songs as well, in case teachers want to actually play these themselves. So please, freshmindsforscience.weebly.com, and you can find out more about that. They're all the references that I've referred to here, but they're all in the website as well. So that's my project, ScienceSing. I'm particularly keen to enter into a dialogue with the wonderful people at Voices. So please, if you want to make contact, please send me a message through my Weebly website, or look up my name. I've actually got quite a good internet presence, and you can email me through through the UTS, through my university. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. And now let me play you one of the songs.